Hello, and welcome to another edition of Arizona Wildlife Views. I'm Kathryn Watson, Programs and Project Specialist for the Arizona Game and Fish Department. Today on Arizona Wildlife Views, we take a look at the art of the outdoors and the exquisite craftsmanship that goes into something as common as a fly rod. Plus, we visit with an artist who builds boats designed to take on the mighty Colorado River rapids, why he builds them and then wrecks them. And later, we visit Tucson's gourd lady, Bonnie Gibson, and why she's making believers out of naysayers when it comes to her art. We've got all that and more starting right now on Arizona Wildlife Views.
Arizona Wildlife Views is brought to you by the sale of hunting and fishing licenses and the Heritage Fund, lottery dollars working for wildlife. Some projects made possible by the Sport Fish and Wildlife Restoration Fund.
Today we're going to introduce you to some amazing artists whose source of inspiration comes from the very items we use to have fun with in the outdoors. Let's first introduce you to a craftsman from Avondale building some very special fly rods.
Michael Johnson is an interesting guy. He's a former school teacher with a passion for loud music and fine fishing, especially fly fishing with a bamboo fly rod.
It's got soul, man. It may not be alive anymore, but it comes alive in your hand. When you stick a fish with a bamboo rod and you see that thing bend like, meow, and it comes alive and starts vibrating in your hand. That's nice in graphite too, but it just doesn't seem to transmit it. It's kind of a soul to soul thing. The soul of the fish to the soul of the rod to the soul of the angler. Give me bamboo, man.
Johnson also has a thing for electric guitars.
I like to make a lot of noise.
He built this beauty and he's teaching himself to play it.
It's easier to get good with a fly rod than it is to get good on a guitar. These little dots, these are power fibers. It's a magic material. It really is.
When he's not practicing power chords, he's working with power fibers. That's the stuff that gives bamboo its strength and flexibility.
I'm strengthening it, tempering the bamboo, making it stronger. It also plays a part in the finish of the rod. You get a nice mottled caramely color as opposed to a blonde rod, which is not flamed. So I'm going to split this sucker in half right now.
Johnson's garage is his rod shop and the nerve center of Agua Fria Alchemy, the cottage industry where he transforms culms of bamboo into handcrafted split-cane bamboo fly rods.
Now I'm going to bust out these nodal dams.
It's a long, often tedious process, as you're about to see.
This next one's going to be 5, which will be 3 and 2. These marks are going to be part of the rod throughout the whole process. There's 1. Well, if it's a 2-piece rod with 1 tip, it's going to take 12 pieces. This is a 3-piece rod, so I'll need 18. Taking a burnt crooked stick and turning it into a fishing pole? How would you do that? You know, a lot of hard work. We're going to scrape all the burnt residue off of there, and we're going to knock that ridge out and smooth it out. Get these nodal dams cleaned up and out of there. There's some stuff in here called lignin. When you heat it, it turns semi-liquid. And so that's what we're going to use to squeeze that and hopefully take a little bit of that bump out of there. It's a process of reduction when you're taking a stick that's about this thick and turning it into one that's about that thick.
After some rough planing, it's time for a bit more finesse. Johnson fine-tunes his planing form in tiny increments to define how much the rod he's working on will be tapered.
The blue tape indicates the numbers of the tapers.
The taper is key to how a rod performs.
We were fortunate that the people who came before us, the old dead guys, as we call them, have done the homework and come up with these tapers that work. And what you ideally want here is you want one continuous curl. How they did it, I have no idea. However, someone thought to bring 6 pieces of bamboo together and tapering equilateral triangles to make a fishing pole is beyond me, but I'm glad they did. This is really nothing but power fibers at this point that's in this little stick. It's remarkably strong stuff. Okay, here we go. So now I'm going to take the apexes off these. It'll give the glue somewhere to go. Half hitch. That's pretty damn good right there. Yeah, I like it. Okay, we're going to hang it in the drying cabinet. Turn his light on. Close it up. We're going to turn this on. I want to turn a cigar-shaped grip. Yeah, that feels good. Aesthetics are important. What colors are you going to use in wrapping your rod? What are you going to use for your reel seat? How is the fit and finish? Probably the most important thing is how well those ferrules are fit to the rod and fit to each other.
One of the final steps is dipping the rod into a tube full of varnish.
And it's pretty exciting to see it come out of the varnish and take the shine on. Here comes the guide out of there.
Johnson runs a pretty low-key operation. He says he builds about 6 rods a year, and it's most definitely a labor of love.
Because it's so darn tedious and painstaking, and it takes a long time to do, but in the end, it's worthwhile. You've got a fine fishing instrument that fishes as well as it looks, and it looks beautiful. And it's made out of a once living material. It's bamboo, man. And if you know, you know. If you don't, find out.
I'm Bonnie Gibson, and I'm a gourd artist. I didn't even know what a gourd was until the 90s. And I went to an art show where someone was turning gourds into Native American pottery. And this was a new medium I could carve on.
Tucson artist Bonnie Gibson started out hand carving duck decoys and small wildlife carvings, but she was never interested in just sticking to one art form.
Originally, when I got into the gourd world, people were just painting on them or turning them into birdhouses, and I could see that they could maybe be something more, maybe be more like a piece of sculptural art. And I came into the gourd art field having many previous experiences. I used to do scale miniatures for a living. I did scrimshaw, I did wood carving. Anything you can think of, I've probably tried at some point or another. I find myself drawn mostly to sculptural art rather than just painting. I'm more of a 3D artist than I am a 2D artist. I carve on them, I cut holes in them, I pierce them, I combine more than one gourd together to get a sculptural piece. I just try to manipulate them and use them as a canvas.
If you're a painter or a clay artist, you get your supplies and canvas at an art supply store. But what do you do if you have to sow your canvas before you reap your art?
We're very fortunate in Arizona that it's a great growing climate for gourds, and there is a large gourd farm in Casa Grande which grows tens of thousands of gourds. So I'll go up there and I'll hand select gourds to pick the shapes and sizes that I like. They are related to pumpkins and squashes. They grow out in the field on vines. The difference between these and squashes and pumpkins is that when they dry, they're wood-like instead of rotting away like a pumpkin would do over time.
One of the first things you might notice about a Bonnie Gibson gourd is the intricate details she puts into every piece she creates.
I do have many what I would call signature techniques. Piercing or carving ripples or waves or different things. A lot of my gourds I carve out of wood, small hummingbirds, and use that as part of the design. And so that's become pretty recognizable.
Bonnie's gourds are some of the most unique pieces on the market, and it's been her mission to change the perception of gourd art.
I'd like to raise it to more of an art form. Where it can be accepted as an art form, the same way that pottery or wood turning or other dimensional arts are accepted as art forms. And in the beginning, I would go to a gallery and want to show my work, and they would kind of poo-poo it and say, oh, you know, gourds, that's just a craft. But after a while, I started noticing that with what I was bringing into them, they would look at it with a new respect and say, okay, this is more than just a craft. You're doing new and different things with them. And that's been one of my goals all along, is to try to elevate it into an art form so it's accepted as an art form.
On a chilly morning in a workshop that smells like wood and coffee, Brad Dimmick is building another adventurer's dream.
We're in my boat shop at the top of Grand Canyon Avenue in Flagstaff, Arizona. And it's a shop I put up about 10 years ago for building boats.
But these aren't just run-of-the-mill boats Brad is building. These are built for those thrill seekers who want to take on the Colorado River in watercraft that's a throwback to a different era.
Well, the style of boat we use in Grand Canyon for hard-hulled boating, we call it a Dory because it looks a lot like the Grand Bank stories, Winslow Homer paintings and all. It's actually a modified Oregon drift boat designed in southern Oregon for the Rogue River and brought down to Grand Canyon in the 1960s by a environmentalist and madman that I worked for many years, Martin Litton, Grand Canyon Dories.
Martin Litton was a lifelong conservationist and legendary river runner. He's credited with helping to fight the construction of the Glen Canyon Dam and other dams on the Colorado River. He hired Brad as a guide and gave him his first dory.
These evolved up in Oregon for fishing as an open boat. And when Martin Litton decided to bring this style to Grand Canyon, he came up with a decking system. And so most of the interior of the boat is watertight, water resistant. And there's room for 4 passengers and a boatman above decks. And I started rowing this one in 1978 and immediately was in love with the lifestyle of running those boats and crashing them and fixing them. And the trips we did were very long trips. They're wonderful in whitewater. They're really nice on a calm river too, like the San Juan. But it's very hard to describe why we fall in love with them.
Maybe it's the stately way they float upon the river. Or perhaps it's just the lines of the craft, graceful and engineered in the way they curve up at both ends, looking like the half moons we all drew as children of boats on the wavy water. Or maybe, just maybe, it's something else entirely. Brad knows the risk he takes every time he puts one of his exquisite boats on the water. Sometimes he loses, and sometimes he wins.
David Brower said great ships were not meant to sit in port. So we run them, we wreck them, we fix them, we run them and wreck them again.
It's May now, and white clouds and big skies over Lee's Ferry are overhead as Brad and his Arizona Raft Adventure colleagues are loading up supplies for a trip. The dory, which Brad has named Bear's Ears, is also ready, and he takes it out for a little test run. He's not worried about his boat.
I've busted a boat in two down here once, and we still got it through. I think Bear's Ears will do just fine again. This is a 14-day trip, about 225 miles. We've got 21 passengers and 8 crew. So nobody has to work too hard. This trip is a charter group, and the charter master is a great fan of wine. And so in this hatch, I have 120 bottles of wine, which I think is the world record for most number of wine bottles in a dory.
It's his favorite part of the day on the water, the evening before he and the others go off in search of the white water.
It's a peaceful place. It makes the rules, people don't. Just about any problem that you have, you've solved it by dinner time. You don't have these ongoing situations. It's humbling.
As if leading a regatta, Brad Dimmick maneuvers and glides, slicing through the fast-moving mini-currents, bracing for the bigger, boulder-filled rapids yet to come in the next 2 weeks. If he crashes his beautiful dory, he'll build it up again and wait for another summer on the white water of the Colorado River. There's nothing quite like nature to stir our souls, calm our nerves, and ease our minds. Jim and Kathy Cerreta share a lifelong love for the outdoors. On an early morning walk near their North Phoenix home, they take time to appreciate wildlife.
You can tell it's morning feeding time.
Ducks and other waterfowl have a special place in their hearts.
Now those are all green-winged teal. It's just a beautiful morning. So here we are enjoying the birds.
Nothing man-made comes close to capturing the essence of these splendid creatures. But that doesn't stop Jim from trying, and for quite some time his attempts have been making a splash.
Well, I like working with wood, and I carve duck decoys. You know, I've been doing this since about 1978. So however many years that it is, and it's been a ball. Okay. I go down to the lumber yard and pick out just the wood I want. Make that first cut through the wood, and this wonderful smell comes out of the wood. The smell of the sugar pine is just wonderful. I use sugar pine.
It's just so fragrant. It's just lovely. So he'd be working in the garage in his shop and whittling and carving and that type of thing, and he'd walk in the house and it's just, he smelled so good.
Working with sugar pine couldn't be more appropriate for Jim Cerreta. After all, he's had a pretty sweet life, much of it spent making candy at the family-owned Cerreta Candy Company in downtown Glendale.
You know what, we all have friends that are doctors and lawyers, but nobody really wants to see those guys, but they all want to see the candy man. So yeah, it's been fun my entire life. Well, I don't know about you, but that's what we start with. Let's go use a draw knife. I use all hand tools. And I'm going to use a draw knife to remove big chunks of wood on the body, rough shape it, just big chunks flying off this thing.
Every flake that falls to the floor brings Jim a little closer to the outdoors and memories of time with family and friends watching and waiting for ducks to drop in on his decoys.
You don't even have to shoot them. It's just fun to see the birds come and go, and we've done that many times. So the whole process is a continuation of the outdoors into our my workshop here and making a duck decoy. And now we can start working on our shape even better and better. We're trying to release a duck that is trapped in this wood. It's just a little bit argumentative at times, but we're getting there. And at this point, we're removing a lot of wood and getting rid of all the little flat spots, little piece of wood that kind of pokes up, says, I really shouldn't be here.
Using files and rasps, Jim continues to shape the sugar pine. He won't be satisfied until every curve and every angle form the perfect swimming pintail.
Very, very true to the shape of the duck, very true to the pate pattern. The pate pattern's got to be right on. And that's one of the things I enjoy, because when they're out there on the water and a duck flies in, they're kind of hard to tell apart actually, except for one's moving a lot more than one of my wooden blocks. So I enjoy getting them true to character.
These are some of his classic renditions of waterfowl. As good as they look, they don't sound like much, but Jim has that covered.
So this is one of my hand-carved duck calls, and they sound like this.
He does teal and widgeon and mallards, of course, and they all have the sound indigenous to that species.
Boy, they're flying close today. I like to stipple a little bit. It gives it such a nice, natural, soft, downy look to the paint.
During the 80s and 90s, Jim entered his decoys in carving competitions from coast to coast, not in the decorative categories. Those are for decoys most at home in a museum. Jim's birds are meant to be outside, which is why he always entered the service class.
He always entered the working class decoy and took numerous first ribbons, numerous ribbons in general. I think of him as an artist. I do. Yes, I do. I don't know that he thinks of himself as an artist, but I think that he's an amazing artist.
I see my end product and it looks great. I enjoy the ducks. I guess you could call me an artist. I look at me as just a guy that just likes to hunt and fish and make duck decoys. Okay. You know, over the years, I've had a lot of people request duck decoys from me. I always requested, take the bird out, get its feet wet. If you didn't do that, you didn't do the right thing, because the fun part about a duck decoy is to get it wet.
They say imitation is the sincerest form of flattery. For Jim Cerreta and his wife Kathy, imitation has always been something that's brought them just a little bit closer to the real thing.
It's just really been a great enrichment in our lives.
We got birds up there. Look at the birds up there.
Even if you're not an artist, we hope we've inspired you to get out and fish, hunt, and play outdoors in Arizona. Until next time, I'm Kathryn Watson, and remember to get out there and enjoy those Arizona wildlife views.
To subscribe to Arizona Wildlife Views magazine, which includes the Arizona Wildlife Views calendar, call 1-800-777-0015 or visit www.azgfd.gov/magazine.